Today, I wanted to talk about the improvements and enhancements I wanted to do for my project for 499 at SNHU for my capstone. I want the artifact I chose for all three of my enhancements is for this Traveler's Getaway project. It was a full stack application with a MongoDB backend. I did want to add a couple features that just improved, and I thought this was a great project to show off the checklist I needed to do for my different categories of software engineering and design, for database, and for my algorithms. So this is kind of what the base website looked like. Very simple. This is pulling trips from the database with these different uh, values that it has for each trip. But one of the first things I wanted to do, especially, was to add good testing. So this is going to show really good for my design of the application was to have good testing to make sure that I go over for security and for feature related things. I just wanted to make sure everything worked correctly and when everything was tied together and there was no vulnerabilities to my application, at least to the best of my knowledge. So that's going to be mostly in our front end Angular. I did this incorporating Jira, and so what I did was I went to each of these my testing apps here, and I added very much better than this testing environment. So what we ended up doing was going here, and we added very much better testing to check if the user is logged in. What happens if there's an invalid token? Test with no token. This kind of just, helped me cover my basis on making sure I had good, secure coding within my actual service here for authentication and my trip data service to be able to pull the data correctly. Kind of just help pull everything together and make sure that, for my code review, that everything was going to check a lot of those boxes that are there for the code review. Um, and so, it helps me answer the questions of does the code completely correctly implement the design? Yes, like all this testing really helps me test if I implemented everything correctly. Does it conform to persistent coding standards? That's more of a yes in my head of just knowing how to code a little bit uh, better for professionals since I do it for work. Make sure everything has good naming conventions and everything makes sense on the way we structure the files, as long as the naming is very simple and has the snake case here and making sure everything's just very readable. And it is very well formatted. Are there any uncalled for entity procedures or any unreachable code? That's where this testing will come in. It really helps me get my coverage down for my code. Are there any leftover stubs or test routines in the code? All my tests are done through Jira, so if I go here and ng test, I can pull up my testing environment that I have created for this to show what it's done. So it pulls up my Karma here with my Jasmine and Jira, and it goes through all these test cases that I have set up for this and how it's passed all of them with zero failures. But if it did fail, it would tell me very specific reasons on why it did fail. So we can leave here, um, and we can launch this program again. All right, and then are there any blocks repeated though? They can be condensed in a single procedure. I did my very best whenever setting up this testing environment to make sure that these authentication services and trip data services, they use only what they need to, and they are separate for a reason rather than just using one just full service that uses like maybe has these different methods inside of it. I think it made a lot of sense just to separate them. There's no magic numbers and there's any uh, nothing too complex that everything's been dumbed down the best I can. So one of the biggest things I did want to go over on the code review is to show my really good, in my opinion, really good commenting. Everything that is happening, especially within the testing or with our normal services, if anything is not named, if anything kind of doesn't go with what's happening in with their name, I had tried to put a comment on what was happening. Um, Let me see if I can find a a good example of this. Just one moment. I think it's more of the new code I wrote here, so um, this will segue nicely into what we're doing after. And so yeah, so right here with my authentication services, what I had to add for what my second improvement was, which is I wanted to add a Google authentication to show I was good at handling the modules and the authentication services of handling it from the back end to the front end and tying it all together. But I also wanted to show that I wanted to add pagination and a search bar um, to my project to show off the algorithmic my algorithmic expertise of being able to add those things into my application, and it worked pretty flawlessly. So first we started with our Google Auth, and we added these methods in with the help of downloading or the module in for my Node project, for my Angular project here for Google, but then implementing it correctly with the tokens being stored locally, so I can still use my same authentication process of being able to view or add trips within my trip card. I can still tie that in with my classic authentication service. Here, I can use the same is logged in function, and you can either be logged in with the local or with the Google to be able to access these different things, which is very nice. This is where I also added my try service. This is where I mapped out my try mapping for my pagination and my search. So this is more for my search to I pull my information from my backend and kind of load it all into this try tree, into this mapping, and so I can very easily search from here um, with this service. So it makes it very easy to do and a very simplified and efficient way to search. Um, the next thing I did was with the pagination on the back end. That was very easy to do. But as we can see here, like I said, with the trip data service, anything that isn't kind of explained directly, I added comments to be able to handle those responses a little better of showing what I was doing. And so the next thing that I wanted to add, at the very last thing I wanted to add, was my Stripe and implementation and my cart. So I wanted to add a cart that connected to my MongoDB that was tied to the authentication as well. So I wanted a persistent cart, and depending on who you were logged in with, that cart was tied to that user, that authenticated user, and was stored in our database. And so if you ever logged in with that user anywhere else on a different desktop or on the same desktop again, you would have a persistent cart. So this was a very fun thing I did, and it tied to my backend and front end, having to create a bunch of different models and services to make sure I stored the correct type of information, as long along with adding different HTTP methods to access this from a database. Um, So everything should be, and so this kind of goes into are all my variables declared correctly and things with this full stack application. If things aren't declared correctly or connected correctly, especially with the front end to back end connections, if things aren't named correctly, things will just not work because it expects one thing: code, price, name, quantity. If these were named banana, apple, orange, something else, it would not work correctly. Your models and your controllers and your front end, they all need to match, so it makes sure all the information gets across correctly. This is all tested with my test methods usually, um, so it should cover all the bases there. But what it does is it takes a my cart, which has my cart items and the total, along with the authentication of that of whoever's logged in, and it stores it. Um, and it stores it in my backend and pulls it whenever you need to. So from here, if this is not being hosted here, this might just need to be updated. Of course. All right, here we go. So now, with this trip, we can see our search and pagination working great, but also we can see this cart that was within here. I can also remove, which is nice. Um, but from here, we can see that I'm logged in. I can go to trips and I can add to cart here. Proceed to checkout. We go Reap Dawson Reap quantity 2, and then this will work within Stripes. And then once this is filled out, it will return us back and remove the cart items, and it will turn us back to this page here. So that's kind of our loop, and all my loops and things are covered, and my arithmetic operations for my search are kind of they're done through um, adding things to my try service and the mapping there. Defensive programming, everything I have done here has been through authentic HTTP requests, so it's about as secure as I know how to make it in modern coding. Yes, there's probably different ways to get this information and to pull it differently rather than creating this backend that we're pulling from. We could probably access the database directly through the front end service, but I did want to just show off my this type of database connection in the and connecting them in between with these services. Thought that'd be nice. So that has been my code review of the improvements I wanted to do, and also going through the different ways I think this code shows its structure, its documentation, its variables, its loops and branches, and its defensive programming. I feel like all these things have been covered. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.